Hello, I'm Matt Kelly.
And I'm Matt D'Ancona.
And this is the Two Matts for the week ending Friday, the 18th of October. The podcast that sometimes has to consider a slippery slope. What did we talk about, Matt?
We talked about assisted dying, and I think we had a really good conversation getting into the nooks and crannies of it. And it is a very nuanced issue, and I think covered a lot of ground.
And we disagreed, didn't we, at the end?
We did at the end, although I think you made some really good points too, and I want to carry on thinking about it too. It's a great subject.
Well, I certainly hope it raises some points of interest that will make people consider this incredibly delicate topic. And so, of course, there's a bit of a content warning, as they say. Check the show notes for more details. We also go on to talk about
a day of darkness.
A day of darkness for Britain, thanks to Herr Tuchel. So anyway,
which we just to reassure you all that it's not. We think it's hilarious that people are saying that, and we think it's a day of lightness and joy.
Listen to the episode, folks. You'll enjoy it. This is the Two Matts, episode 87. Enjoy. So, Matt, bit of a departure from the sort of day-to-day squabbles of domestic
politics
and international politics, and a very serious topic, assisted dying.
Yeah, Kim Ledbetter, who is the Labour backbench MP for Spen Valley, has launched a private bill, assisted dying bill, and she did so on Wednesday. And rather oddly, we don't have the details of the bill yet, although we have a pretty good idea what's in it, and it'll come up for second reading on November the 29th. But it's already started a huge debate. So maybe we should kick off with a blast of Kim Ledbetter talking on Nick Ferrari's show on LBC.
This is where the really important conversation about the protections and the safeguard kicks in. I've taken the view that, first of all, this is just for people who are terminally ill. I understand other people have different criteria, but for me, this has to be a really strict, really robust piece of legislation. So that's the first safeguard.
Who decrees they're terminal, Kim?
Well, this is done by medical professions who we have to put our trust in, and we do put our trust in day after day, to have a prognosis that they have not got very long to live.
What's very long?
And that's the conversation I'm having. I had a meeting this week with the British Medical Association about diagnosis and about how we can ensure that diagnosis is as accurate as possible, because we know it's not always possible to be 100% accurate, but people who are dying, and this is the point, these are people who are dying, so it's not about ending their life, it's about shortening their death.
Right, so
can we say that again?
So I don't know, I mean,
what Ferrari illustrates there, in his kind of irritating manner, is like the obvious kind of
issues. So I suppose, let's establish some common ground. I think we can agree that Kim Ledbetter is not a bad person. Far from it. Her intentions are good. This
100%.
is a proposal made in good faith. She wants to reduce suffering, and she clearly believes she's putting in place strong safeguards. Now, it is a bit difficult because, as I mentioned, she hasn't yet published the text of the bill, but she has indicated that it's very close to another bill that was launched in July by Lord Falconer, who was a member of Blair's government and very distinguished jurist. And so if you look at that, and I read it last night, it's not a long bill, it's only a few pages, terminal illness, expected to die within 6 months, sign off by 2 doctors, approved by a High Court judge, then a cooling off period. It's 14 days in Falconer's bill. It might be different in Ledbetter's. And then the attendant physician prepares a medical device which enables the person to self-administer the medicine, or if they can't, assist that person to ingest or otherwise self-administer the medicine. So that's what we're talking about.
So just let's broaden it out to where some of the problems come, because I think this is one of these incredibly difficult conversations where if you're sitting in a pub saying, do you think somebody who's terminally ill, they're racked with pain, they've got 2 months to live, and it's going to be a miserable experience, should they have the autonomy and the agency to say, I want to end it now? Well, probably most people would say
they would say that.
Yeah. but, and there's 1,000 buts that follow this.
There are.
And some of the buts are, one of them is the slippery slope argument.
Okay, well, I mean, let's start from the top. I mean, the first thing is that, and I don't think that Kim Ledbetter would deny this, this is not any old health bill, right? This is not just, reorganizing primary care or something like that. We're crossing a line here. This is like the Abortion Act of 1967 or the Human Fertilization and Embryology Act of 1990. Good legislation, but big changes to the way, the moral.
It's got this
issues.
Moral dimension.
Big changes. Yeah. Because and it's important, I think, always to use the right language, not to avert your gaze. This would allow a doctor to kill their patient.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's a big deal, irrespective of whether you approve of it. You have to acknowledge that you are crossing a big line. Okay, reservations. The first is, I think, that there are in place more and subtle and nuanced procedures than are often acknowledged in these debates. So, for example, a lot of patients have DNR, do not resuscitate. If my heart stops beating, don't resuscitate. That's a very basic one, right?
And can I just interject to say that oftentimes that is not of the patient's choosing.
No, I mean that's a whole other
medical decision which is a subjective decision
where
a doctor said
whole other issue.
This patient's not going to come,
and there were which was very controversial in COVID.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
There's also something I wasn't aware of until I was digging around. There's something called a respect form. I think it's a relative where you have it, and when if you have a particular condition or illness, when the emergency services arrive, you have it so that they don't resuscitate you and don't subject you to distressing, interventions. And I think that's good. Also, and people often forget this, a doctor in consultation with the patient can always withdraw from treatment.
Yep.
And that includes, by the way, which is a sort of the flip side of that, agreeing to palliative treatment to relieve unbearable suffering, which may well shorten life.
Yes. Yeah. Now
that's already there.
So I mean, many people will have had the experience that I've had, which is watching somebody die of cancer and having a Macmillan nurse say, "Okay, we've plugged in the morphine machine. If the pain gets worse and you hit that button 3 times,
that'll do it.
Then that'll do it.
That'll do it." And so it's very important to understand the sort of the medical context first of all, which is that it's not that all patients who are dying are lying screaming with no help, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's key. Then you mention the slippery slope, and I think this is where it gets contentious, interesting, well worth a long and sort of thoughtful debate. And we were discussing earlier, Liz Carr.
Yeah, amazing documentary.
Very good documentary, which I recommend to listeners. It's called Better Off Dead. It's on iPlayer. Liz Carr's a great actress. You'll have seen her in Silent Witness and other things. She's suffered from a rare genetic disorder since she was 14, and she's been wheelchair-bound, or she's had it before, but she was wheelchair-bound since she was 14. And she's had an amazing life and career and continues to do so. And in this documentary, I mean, she draws particular attention to Canada. Now, I often poo-poo slippery slope arguments because they're often invoked to stop good reforms, right? But actually, when you dig into the Canadian experience, it's pretty bloody alarming. I mean, it starts like this. 2016, Canada's law allows assisted dying only for adults who are terminally ill and suffering intolerably while in decline. Then, 5 years later, in 2021, it's extended to include people whose condition is, quote, serious and incurable. And that's a big extension. Far more nebulous, by the way, as well. There are lots of conditions that... and there's now this big industry, medical assistance in dying, it's called MAID, which is, and I found this, but I double-checked it, it's now the 5th most common cause of death in Canada.
That's right.
The number of people dying in this way was only 1,018 in 2016. In 2022, the last number for which the figures are available, the number was 13,241.
Which is astonishing, isn't it? I think it's possibly worth as well explaining, because I thought it was very interesting, the two pathways that they have in Canada under MAID, because there's two very distinct processes. One is if you have a terminal disease, let's say you've got cancer, you've got a very short time to live, you're going to die within 6 months.
Yeah, that's usually the...
You can have two doctors agree that you want to end your life, and you can end it within 48 hours. You can be, I think you can be assessed and processed, euthanized within 48 hours.
There's a hotline.
Yeah. Now, I recoiled, but I thought, my God, that's like, seems so urgent. But then I thought, well, that's if you were in that process and you'd had that diagnosis, and you know you've only got a short time left, and it would be comforting to me to know that, okay, well, if things get really bad within 48 hours, I can pull the trigger and I can be done with it. So I get that rationale. Then the second pathway is for people, and this is where then we get to the bone of the problem. The second pathway is for people who are existing in what they describe as a state of insufferable pain. You know, they're in not physical pain necessarily, but they're in torment. And you can have two doctors agree again that yes, you have the right to be euthanized, and then you get a 90-day. There's a 90-day process there where that's the cooling off period effectively. However, what became clear in the course of that harrowing. It's a very uncomfortable.
She's very brave.
It's a brilliant documentary.
She's quite a woman.
It's a hell of a listen. What became clear was that there were loopholes within that. And there was one particular case which was very traumatic to listen to, of a mother who'd been injured in a car accident, had clearly developed a mental illness.
It showed itself in an eating disorder.
She started to starve herself. Yes. And that was then considered to be a physical terminal death. That went into the fast track, and the daughter got a call saying, your mum's dead.
Yeah.
She's at the creme. Yeah. So therein is that's the gamut, isn't it?
Absolutely. And then the global superstar of slippery slopes is the Netherlands, which as long ago as 2002 became the first country in the world to legalize euthanasia for those, quotes, experiencing unbearable suffering with no prospect of improvement. Now that's a very broad thing. And I was absolutely horrified to learn that has been applied to kids as young as 12 with parental consent.
Jesus, no, really?
Right?
Is that true?
Yeah. No, absolutely. And the next measure, which is at the other end of life, but no more appealing, is that, and it hasn't been enacted yet, but it was a proposal that is still in the air, is the notion of completed life, which is if you're over 74 and you think, I really like, you can apply for euthanasia.
You've just had enough.
You just had enough, but that is a very subjective test, right? Just to show how, what starts off as a sort of very safeguarded, well-meaning process can end up in a very different space. One detail that I found sort of, darkly comic, but, is that Dutch people, as we carry donor cards, right, or used to, Dutch people now carry cards in their wallets saying, "Do not kill me."
Right. Christ,
if in case you pass out or you have a cardiac event, or do not kill me.
Wow. That is an astonishing, but it's an obvious consequence of the way these things end up.
Yeah.
Do you know, there was talking of darkly comic at the very beginning of this, because the main thrust of that documentary, Better Off Dead, is about people with disabilities, visible disabilities. And it did make me think, we've all got an opinion on this. It's impossible to know that this argument's not going on and at least think, well, what would I want for myself or for my parents or whatever. But there was a guy, there was a red-headed disabled fella at the beginning of this, and he told this story, which he said, somebody had said to him, he said quite often, he said, look, mate, you know, if it ever gets too much, it's worse.
I'll do you.
And then he said, I didn't even know the guy that well.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like, so this is their lived experience of people saying.
Absolutely.
And then it did make me think, and it shocked me a little bit that I hadn't really, all my opinions were being formed on behalf of, in a very kind of patronising way, people I have no understanding of, you know.
And also I think there's another point, which is a measure like this it's often discussed in abstractions, right? It ends up on the moral maze, or, you know, people talking about it in terms of high philosophy, right? Which has a role.
Yeah.
But actually, as a practical measure, it's dropped into, in each country, a very specific social, economic, cultural context, right?
Yeah.
And I was thinking about here, you know, Britain, and look at the speed with which we herded the elderly into residential homes that became abattoirs in COVID. In a socialised system of medicine, for which 3 cheers, by the way, nonetheless, there is always rationing. There is always triage. Is this a tool you want to throw into the mix?
Yeah.
You know, interestingly, I think Starmer is in favour. But interesting, I didn't know this until this all came up. Streeting is against. Where's Streeting, the health and social care?
Really?
Yes. And he said it last month at a FT event. He didn't think, and I'm quoting now, that palliative care, end-of-life care in this country is in a condition yet where we are giving people the freedom to choose without being coerced by the lack of support available. And I think that's really interesting, because look at the context. People are living longer. Property is scarce and inherited later and later. The social care system is a total mess, and people are hurling their savings at it.
Yeah.
Worst of all, and I think this is where we really get to sort of a major issue, the hospice system is chronically underfunded. You know, it's now getting, and this I found a disgusting figure, it's now getting more money from its charity shops than it is from the government.
That's an outrage.
Right, and it's facing real-term cuts from the government of 50 million in over the last 2 years, right?
Yeah.
Then you look at welfare cuts, right? Cases of individuals in Canada who have chosen assisted dying over homelessness. And I think that the risk in all of this, and of course, you know, Kim Leadbetter, if she was here, would say, but that's not what we're proposing, but that if you the point is, once you cross the line, it will grow, it will change, it will evolve.
There was a brilliant line again from the documentary where Lord Faulkner said, you know, that's the line in the sand, and he said, mine is restricted to people with terminal illness only. That's the line I've drawn in the sand. And she said, but of course, sands shift.
She's so true. I mean, Parliament cannot bind its successor. Yeah. And once you've passed a landmark piece of legislation like this, it will be amended.
I do think there was one example, and I think it's Oregon, the state of Oregon.
Yeah, where it's stayed fairly stable.
Since 1997 or something like that. It hasn't budged. And so for me, and I think what's useful for this podcast is where we start talking about where we stand on it, because we've articulated the kind of the ambiguities. But for me, that negated to a great degree the slippery slope argument. I thought, actually, why should it shift? If that's built into the legislation, then it should be absolutely clear.
The reason I think it will shift is because we're living in a country which we have, you know, had great cause to mention in the last year, is heading for welfare cuts. It's, you know, bad social care. I've just mentioned the hospice system. And what worries me is that the feature of life that may eventually become intolerable is not medical, but indigence. Mm-hmm. There was a very sad case in the Liz Carr film where a Canadian had actually chosen, he didn't go through to it because, you know, there's something horrible about this. His case became public and he was crowdfunded and given some money, so he didn't decide to kill himself, right? But here's the bit that made me really feel, oh Christ, which was that Canada's Parliamentary Budget Office has actually proclaimed with pride that May, the assisted dying is now saving the state money, $86.9 million in 2021. Yeah. So it starts as a mercy and ends as an efficiency gain. And I don't trust, I mean, I suppose this is where we might differ, is that I don't trust not just the system, but a lot of the arguments about this is about the supposed pressure put on patients by avaricious families, right, and coercion. But actually, I suspect that the real risk in this would be people getting older in a system where they see their children and grandchildren not being able to inherit their money, and they feel guilty. And suddenly available to them is the chance in a hospital or in a similar facility to end it all.
Well, let me put that back to you in a slightly different reframing, which I think makes everything even harder and more complicated. Is we're talking about suicide. Let's we're talking.
No, we're talking about homicide.
No, from the person's point of view who chooses to die.
Yeah,
it's a form of suicide, right? They're saying, I want to end my life.
Yeah,
right?
okay, all right.
Now, lots of people kill themselves all the time. Happens all the time. And lots of people kill themselves because they think because this is the mental illness, that their family, their friends, their loved ones would be better off without them. That's the state of mind they're in when they kill themselves. This is a fact. That's never going to end. What is better is the choice of going through a process where you can put your hand up and say, I want to end my life, and then have two medical professionals talk to you about it, a 90-day period where you're in a cooling off process. There is a process you go through where, God willing, you come out and people say, well, actually, all right, no, I see that was a mistake, or someone throwing himself off a roof,
Okay, but that will remain true. And also, I would rather we have this conversation when the palliative care sector was in a condition where people weren't just doing it because they were terrified of going into a hospice and dying in degraded and awful circumstances. I mean, that for me is the kind of that's why I said the very specific circumstances matter, and why Streeting's remark I think was very well made, because it was a very practical point he was making, which is actually when the palliative care hospice sector is in such dilapidated condition, and when social care is, we all know, in a total disaster, all these sort of abstract arguments are about Harold Shipman style doctors and avaricious families. I don't think that's the problem. I think the problem is that, without necessarily it being the case at all, the older people get, the more they feel that they are a burden, right? And I think you have to be very careful before the state enables that impulse.
But then, Matt, what is wrong then? Let's explore what's wrong with just saying, like Faulkner said, that it is absolutely limited to people with an absolute diagnosis of a very short time to live. And then it's your choice to say, well, I want to either go through even the best palliative care in the world, right? Let's say that they're wealthy and they can afford great care, or I just want to be done with it. I don't want to go through the indignity. I don't want to put my relatives through it. I don't want to prolong, I've had a great life and I don't want to have a miserable 6 months to see it off. I'll do it now.
Well, because I do think, his line, well, he may call it a line in the sand.
Yeah.
And he will then, disappear from this argument, no doubt, or perhaps he won't. But there are some acts of legislation, some social measures, which are hugely, hugely, hugely significant. And I don't first of all, I don't trust the bloody political class on this. I do not. Once this line has been crossed, and you only have to look at the way in which the budget is being framed. This is a Labour government with 167 seat majority, and we're talking about cuts. Disabled people will be worse off. Social care is not going to get solved by this administration, right? Hospices, forget it. So I'm nervous of dropping into that setting. The ability of two doctors and a High Court judge to say, I mean, it sounds fantastically safeguarded, but actually a reasonably intelligent person can persuade two doctors and a judge that they want to.
But one could argue that if that intelligent person wanted to go to those lengths, then they're going to find a way of ending it one way or the other.
Maybe, but that's always the argument for legitimizing something that may or not be necessarily good.
All right, let's go back a step further. If we say, okay, there's too much ambiguity in the system, it's very dangerous, it's a slippery slope, you can't trust the government to stick to what everyone would agree to. Doesn't take away from the fact that there are still people who are flying off to bloody Switzerland to do it on their own. Now, isn't that just validation of the fact that on the spectrum somewhere there is a group of people who, if we said no, then we are condemning those people to an absolutely terrible end.
But the answer to that is to improve end-of-life care, not to take the... I can't emphasize enough. This is a absolutely fundamental change, historic change to the nature of the relationship between doctors and patients. Mm-hmm. This is not...
No, but Matt, as was abortion.
Yes.
Now, so we could have been 40 years ago having this very same podcast about the right to, and we could frame it however, the slippery slope. Oh, well, they say it'll be 12 weeks, it'll be 20 weeks. Oh, well, maybe it'll be 30 weeks. And that hasn't been a slippery slope. And we would all agree.
No, like I said, not everything is a slippery
slope.
But
that moral, the Hippocratic oath about thou shalt not do harm and all of this business, that was crossed in the abortion debate, and doctors do end life in that regard.
Okay. I mean, since you ask,
I do.
I think you will find that actually, if you pump people today full of sodium pentothal rather than what they say at dinner parties, there is a lot more squeamishness about abortion than there was in 1967 because of the since scans. Right? It's changed, right? Which is not to say, for a minute, just to be clear to listeners, I'm not saying the Abortion Act should be abolished or changed or anything. But what I'm saying is what seemed obvious in 1967 does not seem quite as obvious. And it has just, by the way, been overturned in America, right? Which is not necessarily an advert. But all I'm saying is that...
but that's a very regressive step. Most would argue.
It is
most women would certainly argue.
But I suppose what I'm trying... All right, let's leave abortion... Let's.
All right,
but let me say this. All right,
let me just say the only reason I raise it is not to go through the abortion debate,
okay,
but it's to raise the question of it. Just because it's morally difficult doesn't mean that we shouldn't face it.
Let me buy the pro-choice argument in full, which is that it's a fetus, not a baby, for some reason.
Right.
Okay. It is a baby when there's a miscarriage, apparently, but it's not a fetus. But it's a apparently when it's aborted, it's a fetus. Okay.
Right. Yeah.
All right. Let's leave that on the table. That little semantic.
Yeah.
Right. It's a fetus, right? A 74-year-old is not a fetus, right? It's a fully developed human being who's had a life and has probably relatives and everything like that. You are talking about the term, the abortion argument rests on the idea that this is not actually a fully formed human being, right? But it is because the whole basis of the abortion argument has always rested on, there's a limit because of viability, right?
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
It's not a human being, all right? You can't have the pro-abortion argument.
I don't agree with that. I think the argument against abortion is that the fetus has no agency in the decision.
Well,
and that's precisely what the 74-year-old does have.
Right,
is agency.
But the way that abortion has always been has always achieved consensus in progressive countries, right? Is that it's just a fetus, right? It's not really the person that we're talking about here has achieved full personhood, right?
Yeah.
So. You are talking about killing a person. Now, maybe you're okay with that. I don't mean you, but maybe people are okay with that.
Yeah.
All I'm saying is that I find the language is so important. It's like, it's assisted dying. And it's not. It's a doctor killing a patient. It's gender affirming care. It's not. It's giving kids very strong medication that will have long-term effects. I hate this. I hate euphemism.
I agree. I agree completely. But at the end of the day, literally at the end of the day, whether you call it euthanasia, suicide, assisted suicide, whatever it might be, it's somebody saying, I've had enough, I've got agency, I'm facing something I don't want to face, and I don't see why I should face it. My choices are, I'll do it here in relative safety with people I'm familiar with, or I'll take a plane to Switzerland and have to do it on my own.
I mean, look,
that's not right, is it?
But you can never stop people from taking steps that leave the territory. I mean, for example, if we abolished independent schools, Eton would just move to France or somewhere like that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And rich folks would still send their snooty kids there. Right.
Yeah.
There's always going to be a way round it. But that doesn't mean that we should legitimize the practice. I mean, the fact that people can go to Dignitas is not ipso facto proof that this should be available.
That we should replicate that here
on the NHS.
We've gone over time on this topic, but let's just end it by saying, I'm guessing you're against it whole
at the moment,
100%.
At the moment,
yeah.
At the moment, if 5-10 years from now, it's not going to be the case, by the way, because I'm very depressed about what's likely to emerge from the budget and so on. But let's be optimistic. 5-10 years from now, we've got a great hospice sector, great palliative sector, and still there's a demand. Then I might look at it differently. But I think Streeting's right. Right now, bad idea. That's
I think it's important to decide where you stand. Janan Ganesh in the FT saying Liberals are always great at sitting there and arguing the toss over the dinner table, but very poor at saying where they actually make their compromises and stand. My compromise and stand would be, in an imperfect solution, I'd rather people who were facing a miserable death had the power to end their lives with peace and dignity than go through the torment. I'd rather they had that choice. That's where I am right now.
Well,
listeners, tell us where you are right now on this topic.
Murderer. Killer.
Tell us where you are.
It's a very complicated question.
It's one of those lose-lose arguments because there's no right solution.
There is no, and also, but can I just add one final thing, which is to the conversation we just had was really good. I really enjoyed it, right? And it made me think, right?
Yeah.
What worries me a lot about modern conversations is that I've got a lot of time with Esther Rantzen, and I'm sorry she's got terminal cancer, right? But I do not want this subject to be a sort of war between fucking celebrities and religious people, right? I don't care what Justin Welby thinks about this is of zero... Precisely zero interest.
Thank you for saying that, because
right?
I was glad up until that point we'd got through this without mentioning Esther Rantzen, because again, I don't want to criticise her because she's entitled to her view, but I do not want I don't want the fucking host of That's Life, right, deciding,
which is ironic.
Yeah, deciding something as important to this.
Celebrity power. I don't want celebrity versus doctrine. Fuck off.
God bless them all. Right, we'll be back in a minute.
We agree on that.
We'll be back in a minute to talk about German football managers and xenophobia.
Yeah, really big subject.
Right, Matt, welcome back, everybody. Can I read you a quote from the Daily Mail's Jeff Powell talking about the appointment of England's first foreign manager? This is back in 2000, Sven-Göran Eriksson. Fans wanted Terry Venables, and rather than Gianni Foreigner, I believe they would have settled for Bill Anybody. Yet we sell our birthright down the fjord to a nation of 7 million skiers and hammer throwers who spend half their year living in darkness. Right.
Birthright.
So he went from deep Cockney to Brummie there in a sentence. But
I enjoyed. First of all, can I just say I enjoyed it very much. And secondly, birthright down the fjord is Pythonesque because it's pining for the fjords. Selling your birthright down. There are moments when obviously the Daily Mail is a force for total evil. That was the Daily Mail.
That was the Daily Mail, and we've had they've repeated the game
back. But
again.
It is like the self-parody within it, like birthright down the fjord, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
So today, the Daily Mail, who've progressed not one iota,
not at all,
had a back page. A dark day for England.
Dark day.
The Three Lions gamble on a German in capital letters. I mean, where is this sense of deep-rooted, like, national kind of idiocy coming from? That,
well, I mean, just to add to it, because, the Mail, I kind of guess we knew that, the minute his...
we should say this is what this is about. This is about the appointment of Thomas Tuchel.
Yes, sorry, this is... who I mean, you tell me, because you know about this, I don't. From what I can gather from a...
Very talented football manager.
He's a very good football manager. So as a total...
They weren't complaining when he won the European Cup for Chelsea.
A very good point.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, actually, the only point. Yeah. But let's answer your question. So, in the Daily Telegraph, right, Sam Wallace said the England manager should be English, otherwise it's simply not international football. Okay. In the Spectator, Damien Riley, I mean, let's just be honest, lost his fucking mind. He begins, hand back the Falklands, why not? FedEx over the Elgin marbles. What's the point of any of it anymore? Yeah. They've put a German in charge of the England football team. Yeah. It's over.
We've also had the first great raging debate is, will Tuchel, quotes, a German with a French-sounding name?
Yeah.
Will Tuchel sing God Save the King? To which I thought... Well, wait till he finds out that the king is half German in bloody self.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
The Saxe-Coburg-Battenbergs won't mind one way or the other.
What fascinates me about this is that I hadn't realised, because I don't really follow association football as closely as you. I didn't realise what the pining for the field stuff. I didn't realise this was as... So this is how little I understand. When Sven was appointed, I thought, oh, that's nice, right? He sounds good. And moved on about my day. Went about my day happily, right? I didn't realise this had caused... and I know Capello was not, a great success, but ditto, I thought, oh, well, maybe he'll be good.
This is all about him being German. It's not about him being a foreigner.
It's about him being German. I couldn't agree more. And as the father of two half-German sons, and as a... recent returnee from a fantastic European team trip
to Berlin,
courtesy of Kelly Tours to Berlin.
Yeah,
I'm all the more robust about this.
As far as I'm concerned, the more German we can import, the better.
I mean, look, when we were wandering around Berlin, we were kind of quietly thinking, "Oh, God,
amazing! This city seems to work.
This is a lot better, isn't it?" But I mean, It's funny, isn't it, how in the end all jokes end up being true. So it's 40 years since Cleese in Fawlty Towers Don't Mention the War. And here we are in 2024, and we've all got iPhones and, Wi-Fi and, we sort of consider ourselves hyper-modern, right? Yeah. And yet... in our funny little provincial country, which recently, not long ago, decided insanely to cut itself off from the biggest single market in the world, we are literally arguing over whether it is appropriate to have a German manager of the England football team.
I grew up in an age where on primetime TV, you'd have people like Stan Boardman going, "They bombed our chippy." And that was 40 years after the end of the war. We haven't moved.
Oz in Auf Wiedersehen.
I do, yeah.
He said, "Them the bastards that bombed my granny." Right? Now, but you see that again. Those things were jokes, right? And what I find dispiriting, barely covers it, is that I had hoped, I don't suppose I'd ever been specific about it, but I kind of had hoped that by the time I was 56, it wouldn't be kind of, every time someone said Germany, people would instantly think Hitler,
the Third Reich.
I mean, it's been a minute, it's been a while.
It's mad.
And also, they are a really, I mean, we when we were there, I mean, here's sort of a serious point. When we were there, we spoke to some centre-right politicians in private, and I think we were both struck by how penetratingly sane sensible they were.
It was quite remarkable, to the point of befuddling.
I found myself sort of thinking I might go,
oh, those things you've said just make sense.
I found myself thinking I might well faint or ask to stay, because there's just, the CDU over there has had its problems, and but the fact is that the kind of conservatism that used to exist in this country and has disappeared is alive and well in Germany, right? So it's a bit much.
Yeah. I think the point that the weird mindset of football fans is the minute he wins his first couple of games and he gets us into the World Cup and we head towards, a sense of triumph, he'll be talked about as an adopted.
We've got Thomas
he's an adopted Brit. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And if there was an England-Germany World Cup final, then we would be all adopting Tuchel as the greatest, one of the top 50 Brits who's ever lived.
Yes.
That's how pathetic we are as a nation.
But, it made me think about, you often and rightly talk about the right-wing nationalist press in this country. And I thought, is there a better sort of case study, really, which is these are sports journalists.
Yeah.
They're not even, we're not even talking about the paid commentators at the front who say all foreigners are terrible.
No, that's right.
Sink the boats. These are the guys who are paid to go and cover the games at the weekend and during the week, and they are saying, it's all over.
There was one. I can't remember who it was. One wrote a big piece 3 days before the appointment saying, If the FA appoint Pep Guardiola, it'll be the most open-minded decision they've ever made, and it'll open the route to English success. Then 3 days later, it's like, what on earth are they thinking allowing this bloody German in through the gates?
So I mean, maybe I'm not sufficiently synced in with 3 lines on a shirt and singing, but although I am, but I would have thought that the coach of a team is a bit like, when you get a doctor or a lawyer, you want the best person there is, right?
That's a great point.
So I mean, you don't. I mean, no one says, it gives you a reference to go and see a dentist, or then you say,
"Are you English?"
How English, right? Were your grandparents all born in this country? I mean, that I really...
What kind of name is this, Dr. Muller?
Yeah, Muller, that's a strange name for a dentist, isn't it? Or, I'm not going to a lawyer unless he's called Smith or Jones. And this is ridiculous. I mean, being coach of an international team is, from what I can pick up, a very stressful and very demanding job, and extremely difficult to be good at. Yeah. And this guy seems to me, again, from what limited knowledge I have, to be, of a pretty good CV.
I think Thomas Tuchel will
catch, isn't he?
Win people over.
Isn't he a bit of a catch?
I think he's a bit of a catch. Yeah.
I mean, that's what made me laugh. I mean, I did actually when you sent me the mail thing, or it was we were looking at it. I did actually laugh out loud because I thought this is so on brand for the Mail.
My only disappointment.
A dark day.
But you know what? Do you know what? Here's the irony: is that if I can guarantee, if Klopp had been made England manager, and I was a bit sad that he wasn't, because he clearly is. Yeah, he's gone to Red Bull as their sporting director,
which is a shame.
But he's got one opt-out clause in his contract, which is if the German national team ever comes up, he will be able to apply for
right?
that. And so I thought Klopp would have been amazing. Obviously.
Yeah.
But if it was Klopp, everyone would have said, "What an amazing decision," because Klopp has already become...
He's in the bloodstream.
He's in the bloodstream.
Yes.
So, all this dark day for England, shove it up your backside.
Maybe I'm losing my touch, but I didn't feel it was a particularly dark day at all. I thought, that seems very sensible. Not,
Brilliant.
More good. I thought more of that.
Let us know what you think, dear listeners. Get your questions in for our Sunday Q&A, and the email is 2matts@tnepublishing.com. That's the number 2, MATTS @tnepublishing.com. Or you can leave a comment on Spotify, just like Larry from Coventry did, who asks of our Berlin episodes, did the left side audio get held up in customs, bloody Brexit? Well, yes, it did, didn't it?
Apologies.
We had a faux pas.
Entschuldigung.
We fixed it, but only after lots of you alerted us, which is lovely that you listen and lovely that you care.
And we apologise.
Our production team has been taken... I can't say that. Our production team has been taken outside and shot.
No, he didn't say that. They've been taken outside and told they let the school down. No, we didn't.
Don't forget our subscription offer, Bollocks to Brexit Passport covers. Free when you subscribe. Go to theneweuropean.co.uk/2Matts. There's a link in the show notes. Thanks to producer Matt Hill at Rethink Audio. Until Sunday.
It's goodbye from me.
It's goodbye from him. Goodbye.